Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. If life gives you entitled siblings, build higher walls, not bigger houses. Today in the rLounge, it's never too late to invest in some good home security. Entitled sister who kicked me out at 16 breaks into my house to squat with husband. Got them arrested. My sister asked my parents to throw me out of my house at 16, saying there's no place for me. I struggled for 12 years to have my own place, and now they are parading to let my sister move in with me because she's pregnant with her 4th child. I, 28 male, have been suffering from my parents' toxicity ever since childhood. I have a twin sister who has been my pain in the butt. People say twins back each other up. In my case, my twin pulls me down to the bottom wherever she gets a chance. If bullying in my childhood was not enough, she reappeared in my life. This time she wants to move into my house with her family despite being the one who threw me out of the house at 16. She has always been narcissistic. It is mostly because of the wrong parenting. My parents always wanted a daughter, but they got a son along with it. They even told this on my face that they would have terminated the pregnancy if it was just me. Just because there was a girl in there, they had to bring me into the world. So, I owe my life to my sister. My sister would miss no opportunity to rub her entitlement in my face. You can very well imagine my childhood, growing up in a household where I was unwanted. Everything was just about my sister. We were of the same age, yet I was not allowed to touch her toys. She gets a new set of clothes now and then, while I get a new pair of clothes at Christmas and one on our birthday. If we didn't share our birthday, they wouldn't even bother celebrating it. Oh, I just realized I didn't share my birthday with my sister. I wouldn't exist. I got the bare minimum thing, and that too was not out of love, but to save their faces from the judgmental eyes of the relatives. The only good thing about my childhood was my grandfather. He was the only one who was able to see through their BS. Sadly, he passed away when I was 13. That was the worst day of my life. I had no one to have my back. We lived in a tiny house in the suburbs. My sister and I shared a room. It was more like I had a bed and a tiny closet beneath my bed in my sister's room. The entire room was filled with her clothes, toys, and posters. I was not even allowed to complain because, according to my parents, they were doing enough for me. My sister didn't like my presence in her room. I was allowed in the room only in the nighttime to sleep. Even when I was sick, I would have to lie down on the couch and not in my room because she is a girl and she needs privacy. I desperately wanted to be 18 so that I could move out of the house. Looks like my family were far more desperate to get rid of me. When we were 16, my sister got knocked up by a 19-year-old loser. His parents had thrown him out of the house when he failed thrice in the 8th grade. My parents got them married and my father got him a cleaner's job at his factory. My father's a mechanic and works at an automobile manufacturing company. My parents brought him home, so obviously I had to move out of my room to make space for him. But our house only had 2 rooms and a tiny living space. I asked if I could sleep on the couch, but my father denied it, saying he sleeps on the couch when my mom's snoring becomes unbearable on winter nights. I was asked to find a place for myself. To add fuel to my situation, my loser brother-in-law would say, "Dude, it's not tough to find a place for yourself. My parents threw me out when I was 15, and yet I was able to put my life together. Now I have a family. Trust me, it's going to get better out there." I sighed. Yeah, if living off of it as a junkie means putting life together and knocking up a minor means family to you, then sure. Most of my relatives lived far off the place, and moreover, my parents threatened me not to show up at any of the relatives' places because that would mean exposing my parents' toxicity. I requested a few of my friends to lend me their couch to sleep, but there was no luck. Why on earth would their parents allow me in their house when my own parents kicked me out? But one of my classmates was living in a garage. He let me in for a few months until his parents saw me there and kicked me out. I slept on a bench on the sidewalk for a few days until I was rounded up by the cops and brought home. My parents made up the story that I had run away from home. They took me in that night. My father got me a makeshift tent from a junkyard and asked me to use the space in the backyard to set up my place. It was a reward for remaining silent in front of the cops and obeying their orders of not showing up at the relatives. Tent was still safer than sleeping in the open. Summer was still okay, but winter was terrible. One day it was so cold, I felt I was almost going to die of freezing. I knocked on my house, but no one responded. I desperately needed help. I knocked on my parents' bedroom window. My dad yelled from inside not to disturb him, else he'd come out and knock me down. I felt so miserable that at one point I wanted to die. I cried for the whole night. The next day, I went searching for a job that would lend me a space to sleep. One of the bakery shops needed a worker for his factory that was like 20 miles away, but he agreed to give me a place to sleep and even offered me food. Basically, they baked it in their house and needed a helping hand. They offered me to live in their backyard, but I would have to clean it up. I agreed. The place was pretty messed up with flour and sugar all over the place, not to mention the rodents surviving on them. But I was at the lowest point in my life. I readily took the job. I packed up my stuff and left. My sister was even happy and said, "Good that you're leaving. We don't have space for you here." No one even bothered to ask me where I was going. I cleaned up the place and made it habitable. Initially, it was difficult to get rid of the rodents when they came searching for food, but eventually, I felt cozy living there. I had to drop out of high school. There were a few months left for the final year exams. My friends told me to continue living in my parents' backyard and complete high school, but I had given up. I worked hard on my job and lived off my salary. Soon enough, I realized I had to upskill myself to get a better job. I picked up a few skills. My dad is a mechanic, so I grew up playing with his toolbox. Worked for my parents. They didn't have to give me the toys, plus I helped Dad in plumbing the house. I saved up and took a course and a job at a car plant. I worked my butt off to climb up the ladder. Now I'm a supervisor. Recently, one of my old friends was selling off his house urgently. He has some divorce issues and he wanted an immediate buyer. I was reluctant to buy a 3-bedroom house, but he offered me a hefty discount on the market price and agreed to accept the down payment in parts. I grabbed it. 2 weeks back, I moved into my new house and today I found unexpected guests at my door. Yes, my parents, sister, and brother-in-law. It was a surprise for me because I was no contact with them all these years. Neither did they reach out to me. This house of mine is nearly 15 miles away from their place, so there's no way they would have bumped here casually. I'm not in touch with any of the relatives, neither in person nor on social media, but I'm guessing it's the neighbor. I'm still friends with one of my neighbors. He might have seen the pictures of my house on Facebook and told my parents about it. I still have no idea how they figured out the exact address. My dad knew where I worked, so maybe he got the address from there. As soon as I opened the door, they forced themselves inside my house. Mom and Dad congratulated me and said they were proud of me. I smiled and offered them a chair. I'm yet to get furniture. I just have a bed, a few chairs, and a table. My parents sat down and started asking me about the deal. It was unbelievable for them that I was able to buy a house at 35 while they were still living on rent. My sister and her deadbeat husband were casually strolling through my house like they were planning to move in. I asked them what's the matter. Why did they suddenly pop up in my life? They said nothing, just checking on you. Funny, huh? They checked up on me when I needed them the least. They randomly started giving me their life updates. Dad has developed hypertension. My sister has got 3 kids, 14, 9, and 4, and she is pregnant again. Well, good for her. I just sat there nodding and thinking whether to yell at them or politely ask them to leave. Mom asked me if I was getting married or have a girlfriend. I said it's none of your business. She was like, "Why are you so cranky? Is everything all right?" I said everything was fine until they showed up. She laughed and said settling into a new house was overwhelming for me. She could lend a hand. Just then my sister comes and says, "I've decided we're going to take that bedroom with an attached balcony and bathroom. I'm so excited to have my own bathroom. The kids can have the other room." I flipped out like, what the hell is happening here? My sister said, "You have a 3-bedroom house and you're a single man. You don't need so much space. You used to live in a tent, so getting a bedroom is quite an upgrade for you. This house is so big that I can accommodate all of us." My parents cut her off in between and asked her to attend to her youngest son, who was waiting for attention. I looked at my parents and asked them what the hell she just said. Dad told me that accommodating 7 heads in a small house was getting difficult. My sister's eldest son, 14, was sleeping on the couch, while the middle one slept on my parents, and the youngest one with my sister. On top of that, she's pregnant again, so they need a big house. I screamed, "And?" My mom said, "And you own a big house now. Can't you take your sister with you?" Before she completed her sentence, I yelled, "Hell no. I'm not going to take anyone inside my house." My sister screamed at me that I owed her this to bring me into this world. The same old thing. "Mom and Dad would have never birthed you if I wasn't here. You owe me a place here. That house has become so crowded I can't even breathe." I said, "Yes, thanks to you, and thanks for bringing me into this world. Now get out." Before anyone could say anything, I asked them to leave my house, now. Dad tried to use his tough method, raised his voice and said, "It was my duty as man of the house to take care of my sister." I yelled back at him that I held no obligations to take care of my sister, but as a parent, they were obliged to take care of me, but faltered. Now he was okay with his grandson sleeping on the couch, but when I asked for it, he refused it and threw me out of the house. I ranted about how I survived with rodents at an employer's garage and how I had been living in a dingy apartment for a decade, but none of them came to check on me. My mom started sobbing and tried to hug me. I blocked her and asked them to leave. Brother-in-law was like, "Man up, bro. I've also lived that life for so many years. I never complain. You have such a big house. You're single. What are you going to do with so much space?" I gestured at him to shut up. My sister started cussing me out for shouting at her husband. I said, "Well, then get out if you don't want me to knock him down." I chased them out of my house without letting them speak a word. I'm fuming with anger. They were forever toxic and narcissistic, and now they have turned greedy, but I'm not 16 years old anymore who would follow their orders like a puppet. If they pester me further, I won't hesitate to call the cops on them. Wow, your family sure knows how to throw a housewarming party. If the house is on fire, that is. I mean, your sister wanting to move in with her circus of a family because she's pregnant with her fourth kid is rich, considering she played eviction judge and jury on you at 16. Maybe she thinks you owe her some karmic rent for sharing a womb, but the only space you would be clearing for her is the spot in your memory labeled "People I Used to Know." And your brother-in-law? A motivational speaker in the making. Man up, bro, says the guy whose life plan involves serial procreation and zero self-improvement. He's the embodiment of that old saying, "Those who can't do, teach." Honestly, it's amazing you can't just greet them at the door with a "no vacancy" sign and a bucket of cold water. Your home, your rules. Next time they try to barge in, maybe have some moving boxes ready. Tell them you're moving, preferably to a new planet. If they persist, a quick call to the cops should do the trick. After all, it's about time they learn boundaries aren't just for maps. Update 1. My sister and her junkie husband broke into my house. By the way, some of you asked in the comment if my sister offered to pay rent. The answer is a big no. She hasn't, and she can't afford rent. She and her junkie are freeloaders and child milling machines. They've been piling up my parents for 12 years, and now they want to do it with me. Not that my parents are happy providing for her. I saw the frustrations in their eyes when they last visited me. However, instead of just throwing her out, they're offloading those lazy bums to my shoulders. A week after the first encounter with them, my mom showed up at my house again. This time, she didn't beat around the bush and told me I should put my guard down and let my sister move in with me. I said no way. She basically repeated the same stuff, that it was difficult to accommodate so many people in a small house, blah blah. Still no from me. Then she switched her gear and tried to threaten me. I should have taken the hint right away. She said, "See, honey, you live alone in this big house and you're gone for 12 hours a day. What if someone breaks into your house? If a family lives here, it would be so safe for you. Besides, you'll get a hand on cleaning the house and doing the dishes and the laundry." I said for the last time, no, and go away. I don't want any of you at my house. Just a few days later, one of my neighbors told me he saw a pregnant woman with a man and a young boy loitering around my premises. They were peeping in from the window, wandering around the backyard, and it felt like they were trying to sneak in. He is an old man. He sits by his front porch for the whole of the afternoon. When they noticed my neighbor was staring at them, they went away. He came to inform me as a goodwill gesture. I thanked him and gave him my number. I requested him to call me if he saw them ever again. My house was not guarded with cameras. I was intending to install it over the weekend. Who knew they would break in before that? Just 2 days later, I got a call from this elderly neighbor saying he suspected someone had broken into my house. I rushed home in a panic. He was right. My sister and brother-in-law had broken into my house from the backside window. She was like, "We didn't have any other options than this. You were being a jerk and not allowing us. Now we live here, and you suck it up." I was in shock. I mean, how far she went to rub her entitlement into my face. Brother-in-law came outside of the room in which they had made their bedroom. He was like, "It was pretty smooth, huh?" Without thinking twice, I charged at brother-in-law. My sister came in between and I dragged her aside. I punched him in the face. Their 14-year-old son attacked me with a bottle and my head started bleeding. The blow was not severe and I was in my senses, on the verge of blackout, but the rage kept me on. They all panicked seeing the blood. My sister called up my parents and told them what happened. Brother-in-law and his son started cleaning the mess. My neighbor called the cops. My sister and brother-in-law started apologizing and begged me to spare their son from being arrested, as that all of you would go down with him. The cops arrived and took my statement. My sister denied all the allegations of breaking in and assaulting me. She said she was visiting my house with her family. Her son played a prank on me and I accidentally slipped and hurt my head. I was mad at them and that's why I was falsely framing them. What a liar. Meanwhile, my parents arrived and they forced me to drop the charges against them. They all ganged up to prove me a liar and said I was using the cops to extract my grudge against my sister. Thank God my neighbor pitched in and gave his statement, and based on that, the cops arrested them. They had to spend the night behind bars because my parents didn't have the money to bail them out. The next day, they were presented for trial. I went to the hospital and got my wounds dressed. The doctor scanned it for internal injury. I had to take a couple of days off to nurse my wounds. I pressed the assault charges on them and also claimed compensation for my loss, and the court agreed that they should bear it. Meanwhile, my parents tried all means to make me drop the charges, but I threatened to use them for planning the assault on me. Her son is a minor, so he was dealt with accordingly to the juvenile law. He got a week in a juvenile facility, and his parents would have to pay for restitution, lost wage, and medical bills. Sister and brother-in-law were fined heavily, but they pleaded to trade off a part of it with community service. It's been a week since then, and it has been silent. I hope they have gotten their lesson, and they should stay away from me. It's funny how your mom thought a break-in would be the perfect way to convince you to let your sister move in. The best part yet? Your sister declaring, "We live here now, suck it up." Ah yes, the age-old tradition of home ownership via squatting. I suppose her junkie husband must have been inspired by all those heist movies, thinking, why pay rent when you can just break in and enter? It's a good thing your neighbor was keeping a watchful eye and has the decency to call you. The cops showing up must have been the highlight of their day, though I'm sure they've seen plenty of family drama. Yours probably takes the cake. Your sister's desperate attempt to spin the story was a nice touch. Too bad she's not smart enough to be a convincing liar. Hopefully, this serves as a wake-up call for them. If not, you might want to invest in an electric fence next time. Update 2. Looks like my parents are not off my back yet. Yesterday, they showed up at my house again. I slammed the door in their face. They stood outside for almost an hour requesting me to hear them out. Finally, I had to let them in. I wish I could just yell at them from the window and threaten them to knock them down like Dad did to me 12 years ago. Anyways, I asked them why they were here again at my house. They both started sobbing and said they needed my help. I said if this has anything to do with my sister, then count me out. They said it was about them. Dad goes, "You see, I'm growing old and fragile. I cannot work as before. Our house hasn't been repaired in many years. Everything is falling apart." I cut him in between and said, "Come to the point." He and Mom wanted to move in with me. As a responsible son, I should take them in. I should have if they were a responsible parent, but they were not. I asked them what would happen to their house if they're not going to terminate the lease. They said they're going to give that house to my sister. I was like, oh, cool. You guys have taken an alternate route to exploit me. Earlier you tried to dump sister on my back. That plan failed. Now you want to pile on. For one last time, my house is not up for grabs. Not for anyone. They said my sister was offering to pay me the rent for living in my house, which I can use to pay the mortgage. I said I don't need her rent. She doesn't have to be bothered about my mortgage problem. She should instead look out for herself. My mom started crying that it was becoming very difficult for my sister to make ends meet. She doesn't even get proper sleep because her children sleep in the same room. I said it's not my problem if she is mindlessly expanding her family without financial planning. They were like, what can we say? You're not agreeing to anything. Neither do you want to take in your sister, nor are you agreeing for us. You should at least let us move in with you. The house is too big for a single man. I said I don't plan to remain single forever. They tried to emotionally manipulate me that I should take care of my aging parents. I screamed, karma is real. Remember how you threw me out of the house? This is what you get in return. I opened the door for them, and they left with their bitter faces. I don't care what they call me, but I'm not going to be a doormat and give in to their demands. They must have thought that sobbing and begging would somehow rewrite the history of them treating you like the family scapegoat. Your sister offering to pay rent is rich. Considering she's been a freeloading mooch for her whole life, it's hard to imagine her suddenly finding a stash of Monopoly money to pay you with. And your mom's sob story about your sister's sleepless nights? Hilarious. She should have thought about family planning before turning her life into a TLC special. Their argument that the house is too big for a single man is a classic. It's like they believe you're incapable of thinking about the future or enjoying the luxury of space that you earned. Emotional manipulation must be their second language. Kudos to you for reminding them about karma. It's poetic justice at its finest. They left with bitter faces, but honestly, they should have left with a mirror so they could take a good look at the reason for their predicament. You're not a doormat, and it's high time they learned that. Stand your ground, and if they show up again, maybe consider a moat and some alligators. What would you have done? Thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon, and put your chair back where you found it.